Good evening and what's going on? Before I get into it, I just want to say thanks for all love in my previous video. Full disclosure, I mostly make videos on my own experiences to have discussions about the game from more personal and philosophical angles, or just whatever I want to share. But if there's something that resonates with you, definitely feel free to drop a comment and keep it classy. So I'm having a lot of fun with Tekken 8, but it's exposed a critical flaw in how I play. A few nights ago I'm reviewing some replays and I realized that I'm just straight up wasting my heat engagers. Every time I just run up and my mind just completely goes blank and I end up just chucking out some random move and they obviously block it. So I'm plus 17 and I'm the one that's hesitating. And I'm realizing now like something's gone terribly wrong here. The problem is that I never really made a game plan for when I actually go into my heat engager. It was time to find out what lands against a blocking opponent after a heat engage, the first level being throws, unblockables, and quick lows. I found that moves that do a ton of chip damage also work if your opponent is going to respect your engage, as would guard break moves and stance mix-ups if your character has them. Those are a few options if the opponent stand blocks, but there's another tier of go-to moves that are needed to cover those counters. For example, if I go into Manji Dragonfly to use Yoshi's unblockable throw and people start ducking it, I can switch to Dragonfly 1 or 4 as mids. If I think they'll jab me out, which is another weakness, I can go for other options, but that's the start of a game plan for heat engagers. However, in going through this exercise, I realized that my issue with heat engagers was a microcosm of my normal offense. What do I do when the opponent is actually respecting me? Despite trying to improve my knowledge and mechanics, my overall game plan was still essentially just throwing out moves or setups and hoping they hit. I used the key moves from what I've seen online, but I still hadn't put all the moves in mind for what I wanted to do. If you've been part of the fighting game community, you already know that Unga Bunga or using flowcharts are looked down upon. They both signify mindless play, using chaos or quote-unquote cheap tactics to win. So when exposed to real Tekken, I, an intellectual, opted to skip over that Neanderthal play. There's a lot to Tekken, and when jumping into the game and all its legacy systems, you find out that there's already an ocean of stuff to catch up on. So you might start with guides about your character. These are your punishers, these are your launchers, try these combos, do these setups, and well, that's what I did. I used the most effective moves, I learned about flame data and when to use those moves and how to punish. I pay closer attention to my opponents to respond to their offense. Well, at least I try. But it's all to set the building blocks of Tekken fundamentals to eventually build this solid monolith of skill that is getting good. After all, I had always thought, if certain strategies are not effective at the highest of levels, why should I bother learning them in the first place? That's all well and good, but this revelation really makes me reconsider my approach. I wonder if, rather than continuing to attempt some perfect monolith of technical prowess, that I can now take the block of raw Unga and use the experience to chisel down into a creation of my choosing. Most players, I'm sure, already do something like that, but I've always been more studious and less experimental, but at this point I at least want to try the other path. Expanding my move pool, taking more risks, and asserting my will in matches. I'll probably take more L's, but it's worth finding out just what I can get away with and oh dear. Okay, so even without actual game planning, just having any picture of my offense was already such a huge difference. These are still lower ranks, but I'm not talking about just the wins. I immediately noticed my pace became much faster. I was able to do more damage, obviously, but most importantly, I felt a greater agency and expression in my matches. With Yoshimitsu especially, he has traditionally relied on using his wide variety of moves to trip up his opponent, so maybe not so ironically, just sticking to his key moves and setups is hindering my success with the character. Other characters are not as open-ended, so this won't apply the same to everyone, but every Tekken character allows for some player expression. I spent a lot of time having my entire gameplay revolve around merely stopping my opponent, but with this, I see the way my character can truly become mine. Even now as I slow down in the red ranks, this approach of asserting your own will in matches is still so much more satisfying. And it's obvious, right? There's no fulfillment in always hesitating in your own actions because it might not be the most optimal choice or because of how somebody else is going to think or act. Tekken is like life in that way, but in the game, the lessons when you inevitably mess up are always inconsequential. And just to be clear, I'm not just saying to skip fundamentals because learning how to play Tekken 8 in a technical sense is absolutely necessary to get better. And there are, absolutely, specific and optimal plays for any given character or matchup. I wouldn't be advocating this idea had I not also gone through developing understanding of the game, but the lesson I'm trying to share is that experimentation and taking some risks are also important to refine your playstyle. For me, I think I'll start game planning the other moves I want to use and embrace that risk taking just a bit more. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you online.